Welcome to the 9th Congressional District Forum, sponsored by the Schuylkill County Chamber of Commerce. Tonight's forum is hosted by DHH Langle Middle School. Tonight's live broadcast is the copyrighted property of MadhousenProductions.com, offering the area's most recommended political, video, photography, and graphic design services since 2001.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Zweibel, Superintendent of the Pottsville Area School District. It is with great pleasure I welcome you here this evening to the DHH Langle Middle School Auditorium for the 9th Congressional District Candidates Forum. The Pottsville Area School District is proud to partner with the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce to offer this event to our greater community this evening. And now it gives me great honor and pleasure to introduce the moderator for this evening's event, Mr. Robert Carl Jr., President and CEO of the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zweibel. Good evening, everyone. My name is Bob Carl, and I am the President and CEO of the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce. The Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce is proud to be the sponsor of tonight's 9th Congressional District Candidates Forum. We welcome you all. The Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce's mission statement reads that the Chamber is dedicated to serving its members and affiliates with value-added programs and services and improving the quality of life and economic vitality of our county. Celebrating our 100th anniversary this year, the Schuylkill Chamber has pursued a vision of greater potential and increased opportunity for Schuylkill County. The Chamber carries out our mission through advocacy, leadership development, member networking, educating, marketing, and advertising for our businesses and nonprofits. Our members support these goals both individually and collectively in order to create a strong economy through job creation and workforce development, and in order to create and maintain a strong and growing economy and a quality of life for all of our citizens residing in and around the greater Schuylkill County region. The Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce, through our Government Affairs Committee, takes government advocacy and constituent education extremely seriously. The Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce does not promote political candidates. What we do is provide opportunities such as tonight for Chamber members and the public to understand candidates' platforms and for elected officials to have their track records monitored and benchmarked to the legislative agenda and priorities set annually by the Chamber's Government Affairs Committee. We live in a democracy where we rely on strong representation, and the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce is proud to work with our elected officials and to have our businesses, nonprofits, and citizens' voices heard. The legislative agenda of the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce is simple and straightforward: to advocate for our members, including businesses, nonprofit organizations, municipalities, all representing you, our citizens, regarding priorities that can assist to improve the American economy and create jobs. The advocacy track record of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, and the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce, who work together in collaboration and partnership in advocating on these issues, is strong in defending business and supporting free enterprise. The importance of this election cycle affects all of us. Whether it is concern over taxes or healthcare reform, increased costs and unreasonable mandates, all can create heavy burdens on businesses and organizations, causing great uncertainty, which causes job regression, not job creation. In carrying out its mission, the Chamber advocates for appropriate legislative decisions that will support business, job growth, improve economic vitality, and therefore the quality of life for all of us. Tonight you will hear several national and regional issues that we believe are very important to the newly formed 9th Congressional District and the representation we elect to serve us. Most of the issues will not be new to most of you, but the candidates' positions on them may be. We are not here tonight to prescribe, but rather we are here to learn how they would lead and represent us. Each candidate will get to address the issues selected for tonight's candidates forum. We ask you to listen very carefully. We also ask you to respect their responses, and whether you agree or disagree, remain silent during their responses. Your sincere respect of the candidates and their responses will allow us to assure you learn the most about them in approximately the next 90 minutes. Remind you that this is a public event. Members of the media are present and will be recording some or all of the candidates' forum. Portions of or all of this forum may be recorded and played back on television, radio, reported on in various newspapers, other print media, or social media. Because it is a public forum, there have been no restrictions imposed on anyone, including the public, from recording any portion of the forum. However, the importance of social and professional decorum will be honored and will be maintained. Should I, as the moderator, believe at any time that social and professional decorum is not being achieved, we reserve the right to stop the candidates' forum and ask for those not abiding by the common courtesy deserved by these candidates to be asked to leave the auditorium. Thank you for caring enough about the issues facing our nation to attend and listen to the positions of our candidates so that you can make a well-informed decision on who should represent us into the future. We have a very unique opportunity in this upcoming election cycle. We will elect a new congressional representative. Please sit back and quietly observe and learn about the key positions they stand for, so you can make an informed, intelligent choice in the May 15th primaries. Let us begin by rising and joining me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our great country and our American flag. I pledge allegiance Thank you, and please be seated. A few quick words about what you're about to see and the process that it contains. There will be 6 topics addressed tonight by the candidates, followed by a closing statement. There were originally 12 potential topical issues presented to the candidates, but they were not informed until this evening which 6 the Government Affairs Committee of the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce chose to use. The actual issue positioning and related questions will only be heard by the candidates tonight as I read them out loud and as you hear them. So please listen very carefully as they need to. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. We have a timekeeper, Monica Walborn, the Chamber's Executive Vice President, in the front row. You will see that at the 90-second mark, she will raise her hand, which indicates to them they have 30 seconds to go. At the end of the 2 minutes, she will do a brief wave of her hand to indicate to the candidates they must stop. We have asked them respectfully before this event to adhere to that time. I will give them some latitude, but not very much. The response order will vary. The outline in front of them has the order. You will notice that both the Democrat and the Republican order will be flip-flopped, as will the order of the response inside those subsections by the candidates. We have clustered the Democratic and the Republican responses together so that you can hear the answers back to back to back to better make an informed decisions as you approach the Republican or the Democratic primary election. So at this point, let's begin. The first topic this evening is going to be on health care. Most businesses here and across our nation view the results of the Affordable Health Care Act under President Obama's administration as a bit of a certifiable disaster, both for businesses and those being covered. Clearly, premiums rose, coverage options shrank, and businesses were forced to no longer focus on covering health care for their employees, but rather reduced to figuring out how to mitigate out-of-control expenditures. Today, a healthcare system still very driven by employers is able to offer less coverage at higher costs, coupled with significantly higher deductibles. The 30-hour work week rule, resulting in a newer rule for paid medical benefits, has been particularly onerous for businesses and in some cases very counterproductive to employees' well-being, as employers were forced to adjust their full-time and part-time employee complements to avoid health care costs they could not afford to stay viable. In many cases, we are not providing health care, but rather mitigating financial risk for covered employees. Health care access for all, while a lofty goal, has clearly not been achieved. Fewer plan options are available than ever before and continue to shrink in number. Clearly, the desired goal to amend the American Affordable Health Care provisions and support the crumbling individual health insurance market has so far failed in Congress. In that regard, as congressional candidates, we are aware that your views range vastly from repealing and replacing Obamacare to building on the progress you believe was made through ACA. We also know that philosophies range from single-payer, socialistic-type medicine solutions to the free market. Where do you stand on achieving health care reform? Do you support any of these possible reform provisions as have been discussed in Congress, or are you more inclined to call for a single-payer, government-run health care system? How will that type of system lead to higher quality and more affordable health care? And if so, how do you propose we pay for any new health care system? We begin the health care responses with Laura Quick.
Thank you. Thank you for the chamber, and thank you, audience, for coming out tonight. I think as America, as one of the richest nations in the world, we need to ask ourselves three important questions when it comes to health care. One, why don't we have health care coverage for all people? Two, why do we pay twice as much per capita for our health care costs? And three, why do we pay the highest amount in pharmaceuticals of any other modern nation? The idea that that we need health care coverage is long time coming. After World War II, the United States settled on the option of an employer-based health care system, which has served us well in the past, but it's no longer serving us well. It's inequitable, it's unaffordable, it's unwieldy. The American Care Act, the Affordable Care Act, was getting us from that unwieldy care system to a place where we could have coverage for all Americans. A lot of critics would say, oh, well, yeah, but we don't want to pay any more. But I push back and say, we already are paying way too much now. Healthcare costs are out of control. We have even our healthcare system, even our private healthcare, have no control over the costs. Doctors are paying $84,000 a year in administrative costs trying to get their administrative costs to all the many different healthcare providers. So I assert here tonight that it is time that we find an American version, whether that be market-based or whether that be single-payer, find the American version that we get 100% health care coverage for all.
Gary?
Thank you, Bob, and thank you to the Schuylkill Chamber for doing this evening, and to everyone for coming. My name is Gary Wegman. I am the only medical professional running for the 9th District constituent seat in Congress. Healthcare is the #1 issue on all of our constituents' mind, and I understand why. Because if we fix healthcare, we fix a whole lot of everything else. But if you notice, healthcare reform in Congress right now is stalled, not due to a lack of need, but due to an unwillingness to take on the special interests that are currently profiting from the system as it is. As a medical professional, I was trained to treat the problem, not the symptom. And our problem is that we don't incentivize preventive services, and we charge and have way out of control administrative costs for the amount of services that we're getting for our health dollar premiums. After 35 years, I bring, as a medical professional, I bring this hands-on experience to the halls of Congress to be able to bring about an American healthcare solution to this problem. And I really think that the answer here is going to be a single-payer system. But it's not a social system, it's not a socialized system, Bob. The government's not going to own the healthcare delivery system. That's going to compete in the private sector. Hospitals, doctors, EMS. That's going to be private sector competition along with pharmaceuticals. But the prices of those services will be negotiated by the government with the stakeholders in the healthcare industry. And this way we can contain our costs such that everyone will be covered. You can move from job to job, you can move from state to state, and you don't have to worry about going bankrupt over your healthcare. Not only will this healthcare fix enable everybody to have a much more clarity and peace of mind, but it's going to improve our business sector tremendously by making this more globally competitive. Thank you.
Denny?
Good evening, everyone. Bob, it's great to be here this evening. It's good to see such a good turnout. For me, healthcare is a personal issue. My youngest son was born with a disease called biliary atresia. And when he was just 30 days old, he started on a journey across the United States to get on lists for a liver transplant. Fortunately for my son, he received a liver transplant and is doing very well today. But when he would be evaluated at the different hospitals across this country, they never asked me if I was a Republican or a Democrat, but they did ask me if I had health insurance, every time. And in the waiting room, meeting with other families and talking to them, some of them weren't as fortunate. Some of them were looking at bankruptcy just to get their child treated. This country's too good for that, and we need to solve that problem. I agree with Gary. We have a couple of problems here. One is we have an aging population and basically a lot of people that have pre-existing conditions and need health care insurance that have health care insurance. We have a healthy part of our population that is not buying health care insurance. Therein lies part of the problem. We have a health care system that does a very, very good job, but it's very expensive. Recently, in talking to one of the hospitals in my home area, they told me that over 30% of the tests that their hospital runs are not required. Just think of what that adds to a hospital bill every single day. And then there's prescription drug costs. They're out of control, and they need to be controlled. So in the middle between this, you have a population that needs a lot of health care, you have hospitals that are delivering it at a high cost, and you have the insurance companies in the middle trying to come up with a premium that makes sense. We need to have certainly a better program for our population, whether it is diet, exercise, getting a flu shot. That's helpful. We have a healthcare system that needs to sharpen their pencil, and then in the middle you have the insurance companies. And I still think that the insurance companies on the private side of this can get it right. We'll see. If not, then maybe a single payer is the option.
George?
Thank you, Bob, and thank you to the Chamber of Commerce, and thank you to everyone who's come out today. My background being an insurance agent, it's near and dear to my heart as far as what we're dealing with healthcare at this time. One of my frustrations as far as what happened in Congress was when President Trump came in and people in Congress talked about repealing Obamacare. It was great. We talked about it for 7.5 years. When it came time and President Trump was elected and it came time to repeal it, there was not a plan that was planned out to put in its place. That's wrong. And one of the things I think as a public servant that you should do is, again, do your due diligence, find out from those who are in the industry and also the people that really have the problems as far as healthcare, where we go with this. I believe that the private industry, the insurance industry, does have solutions. Part of where our problem is that we can only do things inside of state. If we would have an interstate program that would actually take care of being able to have more competition, I think it would be much better. Our doctors are just held back from the cost of medical malpractice. And sometimes they're doing tests that they feel that they don't need to do, but they feel that they have to practice defensive medicine in order to get things done. Wellness programs, as was talked about before. We're finding that if people are practicing wellness, there are better programs and actually less people that are going to be using the healthcare system. We need to put money into wellness programs from that standpoint. Again, I understand about pre-existing conditions. We need to make sure that those who do have the pre-existing, as we move into a new private system that is going to be controlled by the people versus by government, that's going to be a good resolution. Again, government does not have the answer for everything. We need to get the private industry with the experts to help us get those solutions. Thank you.
Dan?
Thanks, Bob. Your assessment, by the way, hit a lot right on the mark. As someone who's in the private sector for over 25 years, I've dealt with and helped grow a small business and dealt with many small businesses that have suffered over the last 6 or 7 years under Obamacare. Not just they, but also the families that work for those businesses and those who are self-employed. The idea that our government was going to take over 1/6 of our economy and handle it in a reasonably efficient manner was absolutely laughable. And frankly, the left once again proved that the size and growth and inability to run a $3 trillion enterprise, it's not something that the government should be engaged in. The costs of health care are outrageous. It is likely, along with property taxes, the #1 issue that constituents throughout the district speak about. One story is worse than the next. Some people have deductibles of, or 7 years ago or so, or 6 years ago, of $500. Now it's $5,000. They're paying premiums that also have gone up almost 10 times. We must act. The president has tried. We did, of course, have a very weak bill that passed in the Congress a couple of years back, and it's absolutely time for Congress to act. Yet at the same time, with all of these disasters occurring in families and businesses, the Democrats continue to think, and the Washington Democrats continue to think, that Obamacare is just terrific. We must repeal and replace. I hope we can work on this the moment the new Congress gets to work. We need more competition. We need more choices. We need to sell over state lines. We need to encourage healthcare savings accounts more so. We need to allow association groups, which somehow faded away. And we need to work on reducing costs. But competition and consumer choice is what reduces cost. Pre-existing conditions, certain framework need to be in place, and also block grants to the states. That is something that will work very effectively.
Scott?
Thank you. Thank you. It's very nice to be here. I would like to agree with the statements of my Republican colleagues. The concept of using the private sector to repair the problems of Obamacare, which is a disaster, is the way to go. As somebody who's lived overseas for a long time, I've seen what the one-payer system is. A socialist system is and will be utterly ineffectual. And what we need is, we need things like tort reform, and as George had said, we need health coverage across state lines as another obvious common sense fix, as well as focusing on wellness programs and basically empowering the private sector to repair the system that was even more stressed under the inaction of Obamacare. Things like flexible health savings accounts, similar to a Roth IRA, that would allow people to save their money tax-free in the event of for future medical expenses, is clearly the way to go. We want to protect people who lose their insurance due to government policies, but in general, using health savings accounts and also using perhaps a universal health refund where government spending would actually be given to the individual, where then they could decide how it should be employed, is the way to go. Because then we're basically looking at it through conservative eyes, using the concepts of individual empowerment and limited government to affect the solution.
Thank you very much, candidates. That was very well done. If we can repeat that procedure 5 more times, we'll be in great shape here tonight. I appreciate that. The second topic, different order of response, but the second topic we've selected this evening is workforce development. Workforce development, including matching technical training and education enhancement to the creation and filling of jobs, is critical to our businesses. As technology and innovation continue to move our economy into the future, businesses of all sizes and sectors face a growing shortage of skilled workers to fill open positions. This challenge is felt more acutely than ever before today, with unemployment low and the labor market increasingly tight. Realizing that technical training and higher education are integral in every industry sector to prepare workers to compete in the 21st century is of significant importance. We must align our education and training incentives with the developing job market, which is ever-changing. Specifically, we must encourage better alignment between high school graduation requirements, state academic achievement standards, and post-secondary entrance requirements. Also, we must continue to generate more United States graduates with a credential in science, technology, engineering, and mathematical fields commonly known as STEM. In short, we need aggressive education-to-work reforms that better addresses people without jobs and jobs without people. In this regard, the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce is committed to work together with our communities, business leaders, government, educational and technical institutions, and other organization partners to preserve and enhance the entrepreneurial spirit that America was built on, and adequately equipping and supporting businesses, workers, and communities with new skills necessary to manage a constantly changing economy in the world. Examples of this for the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce include our Young Entrepreneurs Academy, our Business Education Partnership Initiative with the Northeast Manufacturers Association, and SEDCO, our concentration on the importance of our technical education programs and curriculum enhancements through our Schuylkill Technology Center, and collaboration with Penn State University Lion Launch Program, and our encouragement of adequate education reforms through government advocacy to assure incentives are aligned with the job market. What is your vision of workforce development and the priority you place on it? We will begin the responses with Dan.
Well, Bob, once again, I can see why you're the president of the chamber. That was very well put, and you stress certainly the importance of this issue. The best thing for workforce development is a thriving economy, right? It's got to start there. We got to have the demand. And that comes from pro-growth initiatives. Many of them are part of President Trump's America First agenda. We do need to reduce taxes. We do need small business and large business to have lower taxes, less regulations. We do need to keep our energy costs low, and we need to repeal and replace Obamacare. These are important pieces of the puzzle in order to create. All government can do is create an environment for a healthy economy. Government does not create jobs. The private sector does that. College, universities, community colleges, and very importantly, vocational schools need to become more adept at aligning themselves with this demand. Government, again, isn't going to point them in the direction of how to do it. They need to do that themselves. And many of the universities that I'm familiar with, and colleges and vocational schools, are doing just that, working on creating those schools, those skills. But high schools as well need to be informing students as to what their career path is. It needs to start earlier. It doesn't happen frankly, to the best of my knowledge, in many of our public schools. So it needs to be understood what the path to job placement is. It needs to be a linear understanding between our schools, and that in itself will get the job done. Our government tries to get into tax credits for job creation and all. Those are not what gets it done. What gets it done is the real economy, and demand has a good way of helping move supply along.
Scott?
Yes, certainly my colleague is correct in that we have to, again, employ the private sector as the way to unleash reform in this area. As actually someone who's certified to instruct in VOTEC, I'm very aware of the lack of of people entering the STEM fields. And Pennsylvania itself has a shortage of more than 60,000 skilled workers. I know a shortage of AC&R technicians, diesel mechanics, and a lot of other people in the continuing to growing energy industry. So we do need to address this, but it must be addressed to the private sector. And it also involves somewhat of a culture change, as my colleague alluded to, in the high schools. We do have to somehow bring it out to our younger students, the possibilities of work in technical fields as a way of dealing with this labor shortage. Government has to continue to work with them. And other important factors such as, again, school choice and matters involving our younger students are also important. Deregulation is another key to unleashing the economic growth, which will then also encourage private universities and all to alter their curriculums to allow for greater emphasis on STEM subjects and all. Thank you.
George?
Thank you, Bob. As a county commissioner, we're already dealing with workforce development situations, and one thing I will disagree with one of my people up here is that we do have good people in our schools that are advising our young people as to what their career paths are. When we have young people come to the courthouse and I ask them, what do you want to do in the future? And they say, well, I'm just going to, I said, stop right there. You need to understand that you need to be proud for what you do. We need diesel mechanics. We need to have good electricians. We need to have people in the trades that can really do the job for us. We also need to provide them with skills from that standpoint. One of the great things that we've done here in Schuylkill County is that we've worked on a public-private partnership, and we've done that on a regular, routine basis where we have employers that are coming in. And one item I would add in is with the Manufacturers Association with their YES program for your employability skills, where we're teaching young people what those skills are that they are going to need in order to be successful. Those programs are actually being taught by people in the different industries that we have. So when we look at our career technology, our VOTECs and career technology schools and our community colleges, we are talking to them now about what the jobs are, what the needs, the manufacturers talk to them about what their needs are that they're going to need in order to move forward to get good workers. One of the other problems that we have is the opioid crisis. And that fits right into this because one of the things that we hear from many employers are that we have people that are going to come for jobs that can't pass a drug test. So that plays into this very strongly also. I was very fortunate to be selected by Governor Corbett to sit on the State Workforce Investment Board during his time as a governor. And we looked at it from a regional basis. In fact, we have the Luzerne Schuylkill WIB that works towards job training, towards resume building, towards finding the jobs that are needed for the businesses that we have.
Thank you,
That's
George.
extremely important. Thank you so much, Bob.
Gary?
The truth is that workforce development is not some sort of charity. Far from it. It is an investment in America and in the communities that have made America great. The Pottsvilles, the Palmyras, the Jim Thorpes, and the Ole Valley. And we all need to build on our strengths and work together to make a better tomorrow. To do this, we need to change our educational model. And that means we need to begin to start listening to our teachers again, who are working at ground zero every day. The four-year post-grad model is going to need to evolve. We need to get the private sector to buy in, to prepare our workforce, our students training to enter the workforce for the tech jobs of today and tomorrow. That starts at pre-K and all-day kindergarten. And the government needs to fund this because we get a 16-to-1 return on investment. And when I say the government needs to fund this, it's not government, it's you and I, through our tax dollars, making an investment in our future of our children for tomorrow by saying, yes, education matters, and if we start at this 4-year age level, we can have kids reading on grade level by 3rd grade, less dropouts, better educated workforce, better preparation, and better national security. So, I served as a career and tech advisor for the dental occupations program in developing curriculum. And this is the model. We need the private sector engaged with education to make sure we're staying on track on where things are going. It allows the private sector to have students coming into apprenticeship programs and evaluate them to see if they actually have the skills and maybe the personality traits that you may want in your business. And it also gives the student an opportunity to test a work track to determine whether or not this is the path they want to continue on. So thank you very much.
Danny?
There's a tremendous demand today for a skilled workforce. And the reason that there is a tremendous demand for a skilled workforce is that there is technical changes that are happening every day. I can't tell you how many small businesses and manufacturing companies I've talked to in the 9th Congressional District that tell me the reason they are not expanding their business is because they do not have a skilled workforce to fill those positions. I find that hard to believe, but they were absolutely correct. Today I was at the Carbon County VOTEC School, and they have a great program there. They told me that several of their programs, and they offer many, have 100% employment rate when the students graduate. Good paying jobs. This is out of high school. It's something that I think the students really need to step back and take a look at today. So it doesn't matter whether it's high schools like Central Columbia that has the Pathway program that helps start to bring students and introduce them to different careers as early as 7th or 8th grade, whether it's the VOTEC school that does it from 9th to 12th grade, whether it's the 2-year colleges, or whether it's the 4-year colleges. They need to make sure that they're aligning their curriculum to careers that are available today. And I just think that it is so important that the two align. I know the unions are working with Carbon County, the Vocational Technical School, in helping to set the curriculum for their needs. I know that several of the local industries here in the 9th Congressional District are also working with Carbon County and other vocational technical schools to make sure that they're all on the same page, that when the students graduate, they are career ready to fill these very good, and in many cases, very good paying jobs.
Laura?
As a former teacher, my first impulse to go with workforce development is to education. We need to make sure that we're not just pushing people towards college and university. It is good for some people, but not for all. We need to think about apprenticeships, and we need to think about some more workable solutions between the high schools and then some type of private industry cooperation. The second thing, as presently I am a UPS package car driver, which makes me a Teamster. Unions are the good guys, and I think that we can start relying on them to help with these apprenticeship programs and use that type of approach towards things, and have a development not only with the unions, but also some type of alliance with small businesses, and unite and force, because right now the corporations are the ones that hold all the cards. They're the ones who are able to train their people. They're the ones who have the resources behind them. But with small businesses, if they join together with unions, I can see a much more robust way of dealing with this labor gap that we have, and we can develop people in a more to better fill those type of jobs that we so need. And plumbers, electricians, they're good paying jobs, and we need to make sure that our young people coming up realize that those are good jobs as well.
Thank you so much, candidates. Issue number 3, Second Amendment. The Second Amendment and the importance of same has been one of the most politically divisive issues in our country. We've had far too many gun-related tragedies in our nation's schools, businesses, entertainment venues, and highly populated public places. The Second Amendment is very clear in our right to bear arms. When tragedies occur, gun supporters are quick to say, people kill, not guns, while others feel the Second Amendment's original intent has been greatly distorted through the creation of public policy spanning beyond the best public safety interests. One of the greatest lobbies in the United States is clearly the NRA. On the other hand, one of our greatest assets and the hope for our future are our young people, our students, who have too frequently been victimized by unnecessary and indefensible gun violence. Furthermore, also in question is adequate access and higher quality mental health services, since perpetrators of gun violence clearly exude unaddressed disorders. Where do you stand on the Second Amendment? What, if any, gun reform would you support? If the Second Amendment should be protected at all costs, what other reforms or areas of social responsibility and assistance need to be addressed? We'll begin this question with Denny Wolf.
Well, when you grow up on a dairy farm in northeastern Pennsylvania, responsible gun ownership starts at a pretty early age. I support the Second Amendment. I grew up with kids, went to high school with them. They're members of our community that started hunting sometimes before they were 12 years old. It's an important part of the culture, and it's also an important way that many families in northeastern Pennsylvania put red meat in the freezer for the winter months. There is some problems. When you look at the problems that we have with gun violence, the headline stories are always about the unfortunate situations where there's a mass shooting. But the facts are that on average, 34 people die every day of gun violence across this country. Looking at the problem, I feel that you could solve most of the problem if you had a good system to keep the guns out of the hands of people that should not have guns. And that is simply people with a criminal record, that is people that have a mental health issue, and also people that have a protection from abuse citation filed against them. If we can't keep the guns out of the hands of those folks, we're never going to solve the problem. And I really think that what we need to do is to make sure that we have a system where we can put someone's name in and it simply comes up and tells you whether they qualify or not. That system has failed time and time again. All you have to do is listen to the news in the last couple days. So we get that system in place, let's see how it works, and then decide if we need any other legislative prescriptions.
Laura?
I have no issue with the Second Amendment. I have no issue with responsible gun owners. I grew up around guns. We kept our guns in the basement in a safe. The ammunition stored separately. I've shot a rifle. I've shot a .357 Magnum. Yes, heck of a recoil. And, but I stand with Moms Demand Action. I stand for common sense solutions to our gun violence in this country. I also stand against the corporate greed that has driven a wedge between responsible gun owners and people who are actually not trying to do anything to those responsible gun owners and making them afraid that someone's trying to take away their guns. It's not true. It never has been. It's a lie. And when they're just trying to push the more guns to push people to buy more guns, I have an issue with that, because that has not allowed us to make any type of advancement when it comes to the gun violence in this wonderful nation of ours. So I stand with the idea that we need to push back against corporate greed and start really getting down to brass tacks and protecting the Second Amendment and those people who are responsible gun owners, and let the people who aren't responsible, let them be the ones who go to jail and pay the consequences.
Gary?
Thank you. I have a 92-acre farm, so I am a gun owner and a gun user, and yet I too stand with Moms Demand Action. And I have absolutely no interest in curbing anyone's Second Amendment right. But I've discussed this issue at length with all of our constituents in the 9th District without regard to their political party affiliation. And what I'm hearing is that our people want school safety. They want our schools to be safe, but they don't want to feel like they're walking into Fort Knox every time they go to drop their child off. And they're very concerned, and teachers also are very concerned about children fearing coming to school because they feel that they're threatened there. So we have to be very sensitive to the environment that we're creating, and we also have to look at the costs involved in creating this safe environment. I like the idea of double pass-through doorways that lock when you enter, but you have to pass through a second door to be let in. These are common sense solutions that don't involve metal detected devices. I don't want to go to a sporting event or to a stadium and feel like I have to pass through airport security. I think we want to get the laws right. And to do that, it means we need a 50-state solution to background checks. Not individual states' rights solution, but a 50-state solution, so everywhere you purchase a firearm in the United States, there's no loophole there. At any venue, at any time, there's a mandatory background check that also has a reporting platform that all the people that are criminals, that have violence histories for spousal abuse, et cetera, CPAs in their background are reported accurately. We need this red flag legislation also. This would have picked up most of the perpetrators of the violence that we just saw at the Waffle House, at Parkland, Sandy Hook. So much of this can be done with common sense regulation. Thank you.
Scott?
Thank you. I agree that common sense solutions are what we need to employ here. And with all due respect to my colleagues from Pennsylvania, who are generally, regardless of party, we tend to believe in the Second Amendment, there are certainly other people in the Democratic Party in other states who would think otherwise. Oftentimes, liberals favor gun control without self-control. And in the end, it just means more and more control. Everyone wants safer gun ownership, but what we don't want are laws that inhibit legal ownership and do nothing to stop criminality. And that's oftentimes what Democrats on a national level have offered. We need, obviously, common sense solutions, as Mr. Wegman said, such as enhanced physical security, a multi-layered defense. As someone in the military, I appreciate the value of a multi-layered defense. And even such things as the arming of qualified teachers who are certified to carry already. That is something that is done in more than 14 states across the United States, and seems like a very sensible solution to me. And of course, we also have the mental health issues, and this is a big part of it. Unfortunately, we have poor enforcement of the laws we already have in effect. And sometimes we even have a politically correct culture that tends to hamstring our government officials. The tragic incidents in Florida were a perfect example of this, where civil authorities and police authorities were basically unable to do their jobs properly, and then unfortunately a lot of children and people needlessly suffered. So there's a lot of things we can do affecting common sense reforms to enhancing the security of our schools, and as well fulfilling the laws that we already have in effect for gun control. Thank you.
George?
I support the protection of our Second Amendment. The right to bear arms is a constitutional right. We look at a situation where we ask our young men and women who service in the military to go and to protect our freedoms, and yet we question that they, as far as being able to own guns. Again, there are good paths to watch what we are doing as far as making sure we go through the right laws to enforce who gets guns. I will talk as a county commissioner that we have people that are sitting in our prison that have mental health problems. The state has closed down mental health beds in this Commonwealth. And that's a problem because we have families who do not want to have their loved ones come back to them because of this. And they're the ones that we have to make sure that they do not have guns that could cause that problem. And again, I understand what's happening in our prisons. I see what is going on with our children, and that we have to protect our children. That is part of what we do. But I think that by using the enforcement that we presently have and following those laws, we can do that very safely.
Dan?
I am a very strong supporter of the Second Amendment, as I am the Constitution as a whole. I was raised by a police officer, so I did learn gun safety at a very early age and how to use a gun. I am a lifetime member of the NRA. I do have a conceal and carry permit. My son and I are avid hunters, and I do keep firearms for the purpose of protecting my home. I do believe that we must maintain the level of background checks that we have currently employed and bring them up to the highest level possible to assure that only law-abiding citizens, sane law-abiding citizens, are able to purchase firearms. I do believe that we have to get very serious about protecting our schools. I don't think we're getting all that serious. Some schools are far more secure than others. Some have armed guards. Some do randomly use metal detectors. Some do have the double doors. Some have police presence on a regular basis, and some don't. We have to take this very seriously in our communities, extremely seriously. And that's very much done on the local level, but that's something that I would monitor and be willing to add new laws for. But I'm not for any new laws that prohibit or ban the right of people to keep and bear arms, or to maintain the type of legal weapons that are available today. Also, by the way, I am the only candidate here recommended by the Firearm Owners Against Crime.
Okay, thank you very much, candidates. We're going to now move on to topic number 4, and that is infrastructure. The Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce, through a very strong transportation committee led by our chairman, Tom Yashinsky, has been on the forefront of infrastructure advocacy literally for decades. The Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce played a significant role locally and in conjunction with the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry in advocating for the first significant transportation legislative reform in Pennsylvania in 3 decades, resulting in Act 89 of 2013. The current Chamber advocacy focus is on national infrastructure modernization with our advocacy partner, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. The U.S. Chamber 4-point plan for infrastructure investment includes increasing federal fuel user fee via the federal gas tax by 25 cents, last raised in 1993, implementing a multifaceted approach for leveraging more public and private resources, streamlining the permitting process at the federal, state, and local level, and expanding the American workforce through work-based learning and immigration reform. The Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce has not endorsed these 4 points in their entirety, but certainly we believe infrastructure modernization is critical to commerce and economic enhancement. Because this issue has not been significantly addressed nationally in the last 25 years, and vehicles today are significantly more fuel efficient. Motorists use less fuel to drive the same number of miles, and there is significantly less revenue to maintain the roads and bridges they drive on. Pennsylvania has many more road miles than many states, and greater variations in temperature and weather conditions, both impacting our ability to maintain our roads and bridges. Similar to Pennsylvania's P3 initiative, public and private investment and partnerships will be important. Permitting processes need to be dramatically streamlined. Bringing infrastructure projects to completion quickly and efficiently is critical for generating economic growth. Simply put, it should not take longer to approve a project than to build it. Infrastructure concerns for economic growth enhancement are not just limited to transportation, but also include broadband, water treatment, waste management, parking lots, schools. Therefore, infrastructure conversation is broad, expensive, and critical to our future economy. Please describe briefly your commitment to the United States and Pennsylvania infrastructure enhancement. We'll begin this question with George.
Thank you, Bob. First of all, I'm very much in support of the President's infrastructure plan that has been put forward, where $200 billion of federal funds is looking to spur $1.5 trillion in infrastructure investments at both the state, local level. One of the great things that has happened with this, and I agree with the President, one agency, one review. There's too many times that we deal with situations at a local level, and we've dealt with them on projects that we've had here in the county and throughout the counties that we have here, where there's just been too much, it's been over-regulation. And one of the things the President has done is he has said for every regulation that would be put in place, he wants to get rid of two, because all of our industries are being over-regulated. So from that standpoint, we have to make sure that regulatory barriers that needlessly get in the way of infrastructure projects, they have to be streamlined and they have to be shortened. Again, there's incentive programs that are out there, $100 billion in incentive programs, $20 billion in transportation, $20 billion in financing. But what they want to do is they want to get, the federal government needs to get that back to the state and local governments, because there's no one that knows that better than the people at the local level. Again, the local government knows the needs of their communities. When we talk about the environmental impact, again, there's overregulation from that standpoint. Water infrastructure, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I can tell you, Sweet Arrow Lake, we need to have that dredged. And we are trying to get the Army Corps of Engineers to assist in that, because that helps with flood mitigation in the Pine Grove area. We can't get the Army Corps of Engineers to come in to assist us on that. Again, we need to get it back to a local basis. And that's one thing I appreciate, that federal government can't do everything. It's those programs that are getting us back to state and local, where we know what the problems are and to get those solved. Thank you.
Dan?
Yes, certainly transportation infrastructure is a core function of government. We in Pennsylvania have more state roads than New York and New England combined. I will work hard, should I be elected, to get myself on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee as Bill Schuster, current member of the Pennsylvania delegation, is the chairman, and he is not running for re-election, and Lou Barletta is going to be our next United States Senator. So I'm hoping to get on those committees in order for the benefit of the future federal bill for transportation infrastructure. Pennsylvania is a keystone state, keystone for a reason. We are 10-hour drive from nearly 60% of the economies of North America. So therefore, our modernized roads and safe roads is crucial. P3s is something that the president is about and knows something about, and I think he's got people in office that know something about. Unlike the last administration, the Obama administration, there were virtually no private sector people helping manage these efforts. The president's cabinet and advisors is much different. I can't necessarily speak for the Wolf administration, but in order to run P3s right, you need people on board that know what they're doing, understand the financing behind it, and have relationships on the federal level and the state level in order to execute the plan and see it along. We cannot just have someone in Congress that goes through the motions and talks a lot about it, but in the end, we get nothing done. So Lou Barletta has spoken directly with the president related to Interstate 81. I'm all for the Interstate 81 corridor coalition, and I hope to continue Lou's work in Congress.
Scott?
I'd echo agreement with my colleagues in the sense that certainly our roads and infrastructure need to be greatly improved in Pennsylvania. And nationally, our roads are graded as a C+, our mass transit systems are a D. And although only a small amount of the money for the Trump infrastructure plan has been allocated, I fully support that initiative. The P3 initiative must go forward. As Pennsylvania's energy industry continues to grow and our continued economic expansion is at hand, we are extremely dependent on improving the infrastructure in the Keystone State. Streamlining of regulations is also an important part of this process as well, deregulation in general. Regarding the federal tax on gasoline, I'd have to examine that one more carefully. But in general, it seems that investment in infrastructure will certainly garner more profit and will better economic activity in Pennsylvania and would be worth the money invested. Thank you.
Laura?
I was glad that you mentioned more than just roads and bridges, because that is a very important point. Infrastructure is more than that. Water and sewer pipes. I think of Flint, Michigan exactly, and I think that Flint, Michigan is not a one-off. I'm sure we have, I know Allentown is suffering from lead in their pipes. I'm pretty sure Reading is. There's a lot of problems with that. We also need to focus on the internet, getting that out to rural areas. But then that begs the question, how do we fund all of this? Where does the money come from? And I think we have to be careful with when we bring in and privatize private companies. For example, Verizon was given the task of putting internet across the FiOS across the entire nation. They were given $200 billion to do it, and they still have yet to do an efficient job all across this nation. Same thing with in Indiana. They privatized. In fact, it is foreign owned now. Their toll road is foreign owned. It's privatized. And I listen a lot to Sirius XM radio, so I listen to a lot of national radio. And they were sitting on the turnpike because they hadn't been plowed. Government serves a purpose sometimes. We can't just always put it off to the private industry and expect them to do the correct job. And the other thing that happened in Indiana was they did a private-public partnership on Route 64, and the private company went bankrupt. And so the government was left and the taxpayers were left holding the bag. We need to watch what we're doing, and we need to make sure that the companies we're joining with and we're giving these contracts to do their job.
Gary?
Infrastructure means jobs. And it's not just the road, bridge, railway, and airport contractors. Infrastructure means that American businesses can be stronger. more competitive, and create more jobs. Infrastructure means facilities can be profitably built in more places because goods and supplies can be moved more easily and more economically. Now, I understand infrastructure needs. I served on the Reading Redevelopment Authority. I served as the chair of the Parking Authority. We did multi-million-dollar infrastructure projects where we brought new businesses to our urban sector so that people could have jobs that they could walk to by reclamating a brownfields area where a former industrial site was contaminated, but we repurposed it. Or we built new garages for parking in our urban core to use the facilities that the public wanted to leverage there. So I understand how our municipal governments work, but we have to understand that as I'm driving the 9th district, I'm losing cellular coverage. We don't have broadband coverage for our farmers who need the Wi-Fi connectivity for their planters. And don't make no mistake about it, agriculture is the biggest industry in Pennsylvania, and it's surely a big one in our 9th district. So we're going to need leadership on these issues to get the monies that we need to solve our infrastructure situations, and fixing healthcare will bring billions of dollars back to our communities to do just that.
Danny?
Well, living in rural Pennsylvania, I know what a crumbling infrastructure is. Our roads and bridges are in desperate need of repair. The gentleman that picks up my milk, some farms he has to drive 10 or 15 miles out of his way because there's a bridge that isn't safe for him to take his tanker truck across it to pick it up. That costs everybody money. It costs the farmers money. It costs the consumers money. We desperately need those repairs. Our ports, critical to agriculture. If we're going to be a global supplier, we have to have our ports in shape. And that's an important part of this program that has been proposed, and I support that 100%. I think that bringing our ports up to date are going to be an important part of where the United States fits into the global economy. And last but not least, broadband. In our area, as Gary mentioned, sometimes you have cell service, sometimes you don't have cell service. But modern agriculture today plants crops by GPS. It's called precision agriculture. You have to have wireless access for that to work. That's good for everybody. It's good for the farmer because he makes more money. It's good for the environment because he applies fertilizer and chemicals precisely to what fields can produce so that there's no over applications. And it's good for his economy. It's good for him to be able to make a larger profit at the end of the year. Pennsylvania has 800,000 residents that do not have broadband service today. So hopefully with the federal dollars that are going that way and with the state dollars that have recently been allocated, some of those issues can be corrected, and they're desperately needed.
Thank you, candidates. Topic number 5, issue number 5, is the role of government. Another one of our great political divides in this country is the Republican and Democratic vastly differing opinions of what role government should play in our lives, both business and personal. Is the role of government to be involved where services would be unachievable without government's role, such as national infrastructure and protecting Americans from harm? Or should the role of government be in micromanaging business and social initiatives, including such things as minimum wage, entitlement programs, health care, education, and government mandates and regulations? 8 years of the Obama administration set a regulatory tone unsurpassed in our history. To alleviate the regulatory state and reverse unworkable or unnecessary regulations was extremely important to the business community in the last presidential election and perceived as critical to economic growth and new business formation. In that regard, Congress is considering the Regulatory Accountability Act, advocated for by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which would help assure government does not continue on an unnecessary, onerous path. The goal would be to advocate for permanent reforms to improve our economic future. Some progress has already been made. Furthermore, many times overregulation can create unfunded mandates. Unfunded mandates can trickle down from the federal to the state to local governments. And unfunded government mandates can obviously lead to additional taxes to cover the costs of these mandates. Finally, it is clear that our national debt is out of control, paying for things we can no longer afford. To get control of debt, we must control federal spending. Mandatory spending, entitlement programs, is the largest category of federal spending and exceeds all revenues collected from federal income taxes by a wide margin. Our nation's entitlement program seems clearly unsustainable. Serious reforms of these programs appear necessary to avoid program bankruptcy and national collapse. Therefore, it appears we are well past due for the United States to put into place stronger fiscal rules. Political calls for a balanced budget is obviously important, but fiscal rules implemented must be realistic and include hard choices. Anyone supporting a balanced budget in principle, not just as campaign rhetoric, should also have a plan to achieve a balanced budget and a way to implement such a plan. Where do you stand on the role of government? Do you view government as too big, expensive, and broken, and therefore needs to be reined in? Do you believe that overregulation is a deterrent to business development and growth, and therefore job growth and enhancement? Do you believe government needs to be more involved in our lives for social well-being? Please explain your position on the role of government and where you believe Congress should stand. We'll begin this round with Gary.
As I look around the room, there's probably as many definitions for what the role of government is as there are people here. Some say that at times government should just get out of the way, and we should, probably more than we do. You could say that government should enable and empower, and we should. There are things that only good government can do that are necessary and important. But to enable and empower, we have the obligation to work together. Both sides of the aisle, something that I don't see happening that often. You could say that government should be the voice of the voiceless, and that's true, but government should, and more importantly, provide a voice for everyone. Because really, isn't that the whole purpose of representative government? In the end, I think the role of government, or at least the role of government to the extent that I can affect it, should be to be professional, to be willing to listen and compromise, to be leaders. Real, honest-to-goodness leaders. People who remember that their primary responsibility is to represent the views of the people that they are so fortunate to serve. So, government needs to protect the citizens when the citizens are unable to do it for themselves. We have the right to health care in the United States. People who think differently have never been in a hospital because no one is ever turned away. So it becomes a question not of are you going to receive care, but what is the quality of that care and who's going to pay for it? We need to fix this problem, because by fixing healthcare, we fix so many other issues in our nation. Thank you.
Denny?
As Secretary of Agriculture for Pennsylvania for 6.5 years, I found out that when I went to the agriculture community, the farmers didn't want any government intervention until they needed help. And then my phone number was the first one that they would call. Our job at the Department of Agriculture, whether it was the State Conservation Commission or any one of the many regulatory agencies that we administered, was to help people get in compliance. It was not to put people out of business. And the consuming public respects that. And when you can develop that kind of a relationship with them, you have a good working relationship with the segment of the population that you're responsible for carrying out regulatory duties. So with that, that's the way I would expect to, if I'm fortunate enough to become the congressman for the 9th Congressional District, that's the way I would look at these issues. It is to help solve problems, it's to get people in compliance and not put people out of business.
Laura?
The role of government is enshrined in the preamble of the Constitution. Provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty. And I believe in those words. We need to protect from our citizens, not only from enemies from outside, but also from those who want to use us and abuse us from within. Regulations are sometimes called protections. And the last time I checked, I don't think it was a partisan thing, whether a Republican or a Democrat or any other party wanted clean air and clean water. Because let's face it, smart regulations are consumer protections, and consumer protections are smart regulations. When it comes to national debt, I find that to be quite hypocritical on the side of the Republicans, though. When Obama was in office, the national debt was this huge travesty, but yet they just passed a bill in December of last year. It's only going to be $1.5 trillion worth of debt put on our country within 10 years. We're 6 months in, and they have already raised the projection to $1.9 trillion. What is it going to be within a year? We need to stop giving money to those at the top. Trickle-down economics is a myth that has been busted, and we need to invest in our people down here with us, like you and I.
Dan?
Yeah, I would remember the 80s and Ronald Reagan, and boy, those days things went pretty well. And you know, we just got off of an 8-year spend of $10 trillion. This past bill, I don't think, any Republican sitting up here didn't like all of it except the military increases, but at least there are the wrong Republicans in Congress, but at least they talk about cutting spending. We need people in there that are actually going to do it. The proper role of government, I like to think, is a good ump in a baseball game. Play the game by the rules, but outside of that, be as unnoticed as possible. But you know, we're far away from that at this point. But I do think our government, the United States government, has a conservative discipline, which includes following the Constitution, which is often ignored, which is the rule of law, which is free enterprise, many of the things that you would recite yourselves, strong military, transportation infrastructure development. But we need members in Congress who can also maintain a discipline and not fall into a special interest fold of things and also become tax and spenders. You know, taxing and spending is the easiest thing a member of Congress, a legislator can do, and it's the most wasteful, and it doesn't do anybody any good, and frankly, anybody can do that. That's not the sort of member of Congress that you need. You need someone who can work on these costs and maintain a discipline and do the things that the people of America and Pennsylvania and the 9th District want us to do. And that means looking after the people and working for them and not working against them. And when I was Revenue Secretary, that was our mantra, that was our mission. We did it every day. And we were also named the most improved Department of Revenue in the country during those years because we treated taxpayers like customers. And that's the sort of mentality and people and principles and discipline that needs to be maintained in Congress.
Scott?
Yeah, thank you. I share my Republican colleagues' suspicion of large government because I believe that a government that's large enough to give you everything you want is also powerful enough to take away everything that you have. That said, the government has federal government has very legitimate roles such as providing for the common defense, infrastructure, and many other roles. But primarily, the role of government is to create conditions economically where everyone can be economically mobile. And it's true regarding my colleague spoke about the omnibus spending bill. We definitely have a spending problem in this country. We basically, this past year, we've spent more than $600 billion more than we took in. We don't seem to be having a problem with revenue, but we do have a spending problem, because too often we have even Republican and Democratic representatives who are willing to dodge responsibility by having monstrosities such as the omnibus tax bill, which is a way for all of them to duck their responsibilities in approving or disapproving of funding of various agencies, as was done in the past. But instead it becomes a take it or leave it sort of thing, and many people go along with it because, well, they just want to go along with it, and that's not right. Because we basically cannot continue on the path that we're on right now. 7% of our budget goes to just paying our debt, and that's right now. And when interest rates increase, that number is going to increase dramatically. Overregulation is a problem. The government, fortunately, the Trump administration is very good at working on deregulation. Regulations cost the United States tens of billions of dollars in lost productivity every year, and also estimated billions of lost man hours as well. So it's a real price to be paid, and the more government is out of the overregulation business, the better it will be for all of us. Thank you.
George?
Thank you, Bob. I agree with my Republican colleagues here. Again, being in as a county commissioner, I see what happens when government is involved. The monies that are supposed to be passed down for workforce investment that come through the state, and if the state does not have their budget passed, the money freezes there. It's not getting down to local and state governments. We were very fortunate as county commissioners. We were the first ones in the country that the president actually invited us to the White House to discuss these problems. And they talked to us that they understand that government is best handled at a local basis, and then secondly at a state basis, finally at a federal basis. And we need to understand that. Private industry has a big part in this. The public-private partnerships, and we talked about infrastructure, where private entities are actually, their expertise is going to help alleviate the problems that we have with government and all the overregulation. And that is a problem to private industry. The overregulation of our coal industry, the overregulation in transportation, the overregulation in agriculture from that standpoint. We need to put that back. When I became county commissioner, I said we need to get government more like business. We need to look at zero-based budgeting to make sure that the monies that we are spending, that we have those monies to be able to handle things. We had monies that were held back at the state and federal level. Thank goodness our county had the reserves to take care of those social services that were needed. Also, what we had a problem with our overcrowding of our prisons. We had the money to be able to do that. So the role of government, we need to get down to the local government because they know their best people. As a congressman, I need to listen to the people that have that expertise, whether it be in industry, whether it be in farming, whether it be in transportation, whether it be the mom and pop that are sitting in their kitchen and talking to me about something. That's what we need to do, because that's what we do. We provide services to our people that live in our area.
Thank you, candidates. And now, issue number 6, which is national security. It seems that daily we hear of a news report of how our national security is being threatened or breached. From a business perspective, it is hard to imagine economic security and vitality without national security. We used to think of national security in light of physical harm and potentially violating circumstances. Clearly, we have been victimized by terrorism, not only here in the United States, but across the globe. Many have lost their lives through terrorism or protecting our freedoms against future terrorism. National security concerns include threats from North Korea, Iran, global jihadism, and the importance of adequately funding our military, missile defense systems, and technology. Since our last presidential election, we have been obsessed with the potential of Russian interference in the sanctity of our election process and in many other ways throughout the world. We also read daily stories of cybersecurity issues, both via social media and in and through our daily business transactions. Another aspect of national security involves immigration laws, border security, including President Trump's campaign commitment to build a wall and enhance border security, and the role of government in enforcing the federal immigration laws versus individual states allowing sanctuary city status. While it is apparent that the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA, needs to be addressed through legislation, simultaneously border security seems to need to be bolstered, and promotion of functioning legal immigration system that supports economic growth and discourages illegal immigration. The question of continued federal funding for states and cities not complying with federal law is being greatly debated. Where do you stand as a congressional candidate in addressing these critical issues and the importance to you of same? What priority do you place on national and cybersecurity? How aware are you of the ongoing work with Congress and the Department of Homeland Security to expand the SAFETY Act, which provides liability protections for qualified anti-terrorism technologies to cover products and services used to prevent or counter significant cyber incidents? We'll begin with Scott.
Thank you very much. My background serving in the CIA overseas and in the U.S. Navy makes me very aware of national security, having served on the pointing end of the spear, so to speak, for my entire life. Contrary to maybe what some people perceive, right now the world is considerably more safe than it was about 2 years ago. Fortunately, the Trump administration has reestablished relations with allies, and our enemies or rivals on the world stage seem to basically fear us a little bit more than under the disastrous foreign policy of the Obama administration. North Korea, Iran, China, and Russia all of them are national security threats of varying degrees. North Korea is a particularly urgent threat, and I'm very encouraged by the president's breakthrough in negotiations with North Korea, which is something that was basically inconceivable less than 5 years ago. We're also looking at rolling back the agreed framework with Iran, which was in fact a disastrous agreement concluded by President Obama, which the Iranians are openly cheating on. So we'll be likely rolling that back, which is a good thing, which will improve security throughout the Middle East because Iran is actively cheating on the agreed framework. Border security, have no doubt, border security is national security. We need to build a wall to enhance our national security and to work at stemming the tide of illegal immigration. I state this as the husband and stepfather of legal immigrants. My wife and my stepdaughter are green card holders and proud Americans. However, the continued access of illegal immigrants into the United States is an open affront and insult to any American who entered the United States the correct way, the legal way, and that needs to be stopped. We need to enact programs such as E-Verify. We need to end chain migration. We need to end the visa lottery, and we need to end social services for illegal immigrations, which is another reason why we have the debt problems that we have because of unsustainable spending. The concept of peace through strength, which is being adopted now in the America First platform of the president, is moving us forward into a much better national security environment. Increased spending for the military is required at this point because of basically the abuse of the military that we saw in the past 10 or so years, where the military was not provided with the equipment that it required to complete its mission. This is getting back on track now, and so I'm optimistic about the improved condition of our armed forces, which is of course of great concern to me as a former naval officer. The last thing is I believe sanctuary cities, have no doubt. Sanctuary cities are basically nullification zones where state officials are widely disregarding federal law and allowing criminal illegal aliens to have free reign in those areas. This must be stopped, and these people must be brought must be brought back into the legal framework, and people who are criminal illegal aliens must be deported without question.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
George?
First of all, thank you, Scott, for your service to our country, and I want to thank all of our men and women in active duty and all our veterans who have provided us the freedoms that we have. National security is very serious. I have a son-in-law who is a naval commander who actually worked at the White House military office. He was a training officer for the White House. I had another son-in-law, again, an Annapolis graduate, who was a P-3 pilot. They served over the coast of Iraq, Somalia, in Afghanistan, knowing what we have to deal with from national security. I said to my son-in-law, Pete, one time, knowing that he couldn't really say anything, I said, Pete, if you could say something, what would you say? He said, Dad, he says, when I had top secret clearance about a mission I was doing, he says, it's a scary world. Then I saw what the president sees on a daily basis. You don't know how scary it is. I give credit to President Trump for taking the stance that he has with those who disagree with our freedoms and that are against it. You look at bringing North Korea to the table, that never would have happened years ago. In fact, it wouldn't have happened 2 years ago. You have a situation with Iran. You had the situation with Russia, being in Lithuania for a while, to see that they see that we were the liberal country that you could just push over, and that Russia was showing themselves as being the strength. Guess what? It's different right now because we have a commander-in-chief who's surrounded himself by good military leaders to make sure that they are making good, sound decisions for our national security. I have a lot of friends who have come here as legal immigrants, and they belong here. We are a country of immigrants. However, illegal immigration, I totally disagree with. As far as our border security, we do have to do something. We have to look at a wall. We have to look at right now, the use, our Border Patrol is now they're using drones to see when we have a situation where there's infiltration. Because not only do you have people that are coming in and are being a drain on our society, but you also have situations where they are bringing in opioids and that train of drugs coming in that's affecting our livelihood. That's a scary situation.
Thank you, George. Dan.
Yes, thank you. Well, just back to that $10 trillion of spending over the last 8 years. During that time, our military was greatly weakened, and there were really no improvements to transportation infrastructure. And folks, we can't go back to that. That's a big reason why these midterms coming up are so important, and we elect someone on May 15th who can win in the general. Because the liberal approach to these things is a disaster. I think we all remember a few years back the Libyan situation, Benghazi, Egypt. The list really goes on. And so this is a very serious issue. Over the last number of years, our military has been weakened. Yet at the same time, our competitors, adversaries, enemies, their military strengths have improved. China has a navy that is getting near the strength of ours, with plans of being much larger. And Russia hasn't held back much either. So these are very, very serious issues. The number one role of our federal government is national security. Our military certainly needs to be focused on our enemies. And I would leave that up to the generals in the field to decide. Intelligence, cybersecurity, all the modern threats that we currently have. I also think our military needs more pay increases for our soldiers and sailors, men and women, all those in the service, and our veterans are part of this. Our veterans need to receive the care that is proportional to what they did for us, for our country. And that is why I am very strongly going to work very hard to get on the Veterans Affairs Committee. There's no member of the Pennsylvania delegation currently on the Veterans Affairs Committee. National security is border security. We have such problems coming through. Hundreds and hundreds of innocent people there's human trafficking taking place. Opioids are coming in. The liberals, once again, have created these sanctuary cities, which are completely unlawful, and we do need to build a wall.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. Denny?
Well, I feel that border security is a huge component of national security. And I think our immigration system really needs to be made an e-system, and it needs to be effective and efficient, because it creates a lot of problems with the way it is today. For example, the H-2A system that farmers use to bring in seasonal workers, it just does not work. The farmers are not comfortable with being able to get the workers when they need them, so they've changed, in many cases, changed the type of crops that they grow. So now we're importing those crops instead of growing them here. So I think with the technology we have to do, there's a tremendous amount of room for improvement with our immigration system in making sure that legal and qualified people come into this country. Cybersecurity, no doubt about it. When you start looking at some of the consequences of that, it's not only, as the headlines show, the concerns of Russia and their involvement and the way that they've been able to infiltrate us over the last few years, but what do other countries have the option in terms of, for example, our power grid? What would that do to us if they were able to infiltrate that and shut down the power for our cities? So certainly lots of things to look at, lots of things to be concerned about. I know the wall is mentioned a lot of time as an important part of homeland security and border security. I guess from the standpoint of where I'm at, I guess maybe it's the farm boy in me. A $70 billion wall just looks like it's a little too expensive. And not on top of that, a $700 million a year maintenance program on top of it doesn't fit a budget where we already have a deficit. I think there's ways to secure the border without spending that kind of money that make sure that we're safe here.
Laura?
I want to start by saying that I think the idea of a wall is a huge waste of taxpayer dollars. There are better ways to secure our borders, and that is done by people. If anybody knows anything about the Mexican-United States border, is that it's incredibly long, goes across many different types of environment. There are so many issues with building a wall, and there are even eminent domain issues, etc. And we must instead invest in more border patrol. We've been in deficit of actual people, boots on the ground at the border for many years, and I would much rather see money spent towards jobs rather than towards some wall. Secondly, national security is not just about military. It's also about economic national security, energy national security, environment national security, food national security, and cyber. Just last week, the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security, along with the National Cybersecurity Center out of the United Kingdom, issued an unprecedented formal warning about malicious cyber security taken on by the Russian government. I hear nothing from this administration. I hear nothing from Congress about how we're going to make sure that this upcoming election is prevented. Any type of meddling from outside forces is preventable.
Gary?
We Americans have a bad case of amnesia. We tend to forget our history, even recent history. The best defense and the strongest national security policy is a healthy economy. So again, fixing healthcare brings us back to strengthening our economy. This is what did in the Soviet Union. To reinvent our energy grid, we're going to need to move to a 21st century solution for energy in America, and that is a green energy economy, where the source of our energy cannot be monopolized or controlled. If you notice, the price of a barrel of oil is up. The OPEC nations and the Russians have limited their supplies, and so the price on the market goes up. But this won't happen if we don't have a fossil fuel economy, if we have a green energy economy. And that brings good jobs to the 9th District, because we have the open space for the solar panels and for the wind turbines, and we can manufacture them here too. I'm for net neutrality. I'm for strengthening our State Department, not for gutting it. I think if you want a national security policy based upon xenophobia and distorted facts, we have a few candidates for you up here tonight for your listening pleasure. But North Korea, really? What have they done except violate every agreement that they were ever entered into or deny the basic human rights of all their people? So yes, it's good we're going to talk with them, but talk is cheap, okay? So let's wake up and have some responsible diplomacy, and let's hope there's more than one or two people in the bench deep in our State Department that can help make this happen.
Thank you, candidates. We're now going to move to the candidate closing statements. This is their 2 minutes, but I've given them this charge, and I'm going to reiterate, I think, the importance of this. As already highlighted tonight, candidates, there are many issues facing our nation, the greatest country in the world, with freedoms unsurpassed anywhere else in the world. We presume, as a congressional candidate, that you have many issues you have an official platform position for. Maybe some not addressed in the previous issues or topics covered here tonight. As you provide your closing statement, please seriously consider telling us what you believe is the #1 issue facing our nation. What are your beliefs about that #1 issue? And as a congressional leader, what leadership aspects will you bring to Congress to address that issue? We'll begin with the closing statements by Laura.
Thank you. So I'm a self-professed history geek, and one of my favorite times and places in history is in France in 1789. The reason it's my favorite time and place is that before that time, before 1789, people, when they were born poor, they died poor. They just accepted that as the lot in their life. If you were born rich, you died rich. Again, just accepted. But it was due to the Age of Enlightenment that people started to see that you have individual rights and individual freedoms. I see that same type of medieval mindset happening today in the United States. People are accepting as just, this is the fact of life, they're accepting low wages. They're accepting the fact that healthcare is only for those who can afford it. They're accepting the fact that you must go into huge student loan debt in order to get any type of education. I'm here to change that. I say we can fight against. Those are lies, and they are shackling this American dream that we so closely hold dear. I will fight, if elected, I will fight to make sure people have livable wages. I will fight to make sure that you are not, at the end of the month, deciding, should I pay my health care bill or should I pay my grocery bill? I will fight to make sure that everybody has access to affordable and good education. We need to stop letting them divide us. We need to start believing in the good future for ourselves. And I want you to think of me on May 15th, because if you send me down to Washington, I will put the represent back in representative.
Thank you, Laura. Gary.
My name is Dr. Gary Wegman, and I believe we need a representative in Congress who respects and reflects the values and priorities of all the people of the 9th District, without regard to political party affiliation. When I talk to our constituents, they don't say to me, yes, we want more of those politics of division. No, they say, we're all Americans here, Dr. Wegman. Let's come up with solutions for the betterment of all the people in our community, each and every one of us. Our #1 priority is not going to be to build a wall or to deny people, hardworking people who want to become Americans from entering our country. Our priority is going to be to create safe, secure, and high-quality jobs for each and every one of us who work and live in our communities. We need to begin this process by fixing health care. As a medical professional with over 35 years of experience in this field, I am going to begin by advocating for a truly American healthcare system, one that starts by ensuring that each and every one of us is covered. This will not be a socialistic system, but rather one that will allow the private sector to compete for our healthcare dollars, and you will get to vote with your feet whether or not you're happy with the care and service you're receiving, rather than being subject to an in-network or out-of-network system. This one issue, if done properly, will bring us back billions of dollars that we can use for our infrastructure needs. We need to fix public education, but we're not going to do it by starving government or by allowing the wealthiest among us to not pay their fair share. There are people on this dais that have stated that they're skeptical whether or not climate change is caused by humans. I say it doesn't matter, okay? Because we really need to share this finite source of soil, water, and air that we have. And we have the intelligence to understand that doing things that make our environment safer and healthier is smart business. And so in the best interest of our children's future, we want sensible protections, and we don't want to throw our environment under the bus for a few short-term dollars.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Move on to Denny.
When I talk to people in the 9th Congressional District, my #1 priority becomes pretty obvious. Many of the working families are hurting, and they feel that no one is listening. They really want to send someone to Congress from the real world. As a farmer, as a small business owner, as a former Secretary of Agriculture, I understand what hard work is. I understand what it is to meet a payroll. I understand what good public policy is, regardless of the politics behind it. The people in the 9th Congressional District share their values with me. The things that are important to them, it's integrity, it's accountability. If I'm elected, I promise to stay focused on these issues and carry these values to Congress, and I promise to be their voice. Congress needs a unifier, and they need some working class wisdom, and that's what I hope to do if I'm elected.
Thank you, Denny. George?
Thank you. As a county commissioner, I've been very fortunate to work with commissioners from every single solitary county that is involved here to help provide solutions. As a commissioner, we are already dealing with the opioid crisis. We are dealing with agriculture problems. We are dealing with so many problems that need to be addressed at Washington. Again, on a bipartisan basis, we work well together in Schuylkill County. I would say 98% of all decisions we all agree on because they are what the people need. I am pro-life, and that's a very important issue to me. I believe that life should be protected at every stage, from conception to natural death. And that fits right into the healthcare situation that we have, to make sure that we have good, affordable healthcare for everyone. The immigration situation that we're dealing with, it's important because of the people that are out there that aren't paying their fair share from that standpoint. Let's do it legally. To take care of our firefighters and our first responders and our police officers that are there, that are really on the first line of defense for us here in our country. The unfunded mandates and regulations that we have, I think that they are too many. We need to get government back to a local basis. And again, we need to protect and take care of our veterans. They are very important to us from that standpoint. I live, I work, I worship, and I already serve the people of this district. I serve the people of my county. I work with fellow commissioners throughout this district, and I want to do that for you in Congress. And I ask for your prayers and for your vote. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, George. Dan?
I've lived in our region for 30 years. My wife and I have 27 years, who's here, raised our family in Luzerne County. During that time, I helped grow a business from a small business into a pretty large business, employing hundreds of people in Luzerne County. I did serve as Revenue Secretary. I'm now running for Congress for a number of reasons. First and foremost, it's going to work for the people. Folks, there's just simply too many in Congress that are about special interests, that are about self-interest, and they've lost the we the people interest. And I mean that in terms of the Constitution, and I mean it just for the individuals, you, that you need to understand how to go work for. I'm running because I have experiences, these 30 years of experiences in our community. I understand this district. I think I reflect this district to assure that their voices are in fact heard in Congress. I'm running because none of us like what we see in Washington. There's too much finger pointing, there's too much problem finding, and not anywhere near enough problem solving. It is about negotiating. It is about incremental gains. That's what our president is working on. I do want to go to Washington and help our president achieve the agenda, the America First agenda. It is about economic prosperity for all. It is about national security, much of what we've talked up here. And it is about draining the swamp so as we can gain more accountability. And that includes term limits. That includes a balanced budget amendment. It needs to happen in the next few years. And it includes a high level of regulatory reform. But the #1 issue facing our country are obstructionists and those who think they know better than you and who want our government to be about their power as opposed to the people. And this tends to be the left. There's certainly those on the right that participate. And when I say left, I don't mean Democrats, right? Because in Washington, I know many good Democrats throughout this district. When you get to Washington, you have to follow Nancy Pelosi's lead, and most Democrats in the 9th aren't about following Nancy Pelosi's lead. They're about following Pennsylvania values.
Thank you, Dan. Scott.
Yes, thanks, folks. I'm a political conservative. I'm a Navy veteran, a former Trump delegate, and a resident in Berks County. I'm entering this race and I'm running because I'm also, as a middle-class American, I'm tired of seeing the president's Make America Great Again agenda falter due to lack of support in the U.S. Congress. The people in Congress right now do not have the interests of the American people clearly in mind. They seem to be mostly consumed with belonging to lobbyists and upholding special interests instead of thinking about the overall picture and improvement of life for all Americans. Items like national security, building the wall, deregulation are all very important parts of the president's Make America Great Again agenda, and I fully support them. But the one issue that we haven't talked about here so much tonight is something I also feel very strongly about, and that is draining the swamp. Now, I know it's an expression and it sounds kind of trite, but it really is true. As a former serving naval officer and CIA officer, I'm very aware of the politicization that has occurred in our government, which we can see every day when we see things like the Justice Department and the extra legality and abuse of powers that we're seeing every day. Reminds me of exactly why I'm running. Because this government is supposed to be a government that treats everyone equally under the law. And I, for one, am sick and tired of seeing high officials abuse their offices and constantly block the agenda which the American people have voted for. Sean Hannity and Dr. Sebastian Gorka have endorsed my candidacy, and I feel very strongly about going to Washington, representing the people, and making sure that the president's Make America Great Again agenda is fulfilled. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And now for my closing statement. On behalf of the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce, our board of directors, our staff, and our 811 business and nonprofit members, many of whom graciously volunteered to assist us this evening, I sincerely thank you for your attendance and reinforcing the importance of the process so important to our freedom, electing who will represent us. The Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce has been truly pleased and honored to host this 9th Congressional District Candidates Forum. I thank you all candidates and your courage to not only be here this evening, but to run for this office. We feel we have been blessed to secure the agreement of all 6 candidates to the forum this evening, and we certainly thank you for your participation and professionalism. We also are very thankful to a very well-organized and gracious member, our host this evening, the Pottsville Area School District, under the leadership of Superintendent Jess Weibel and the school board, who invited us into this beautiful venue and provided us with all the staff assistance necessary to provide a very professional candidates forum. The Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce has tremendous working relationship with all of our members, but the Pottsville Area School District has gone above and beyond to accommodate our needs for this evening. As we approach the spring of 2018, no one, including the Chamber's Government Affairs Committee, under the leadership of Chairman Robert Williams, could have imagined the actions of February 19th when Pennsylvania Supreme Court created a new congressional legislative redistricting for Pennsylvania and the new 9th Congressional District, comprised of all of Carbon, Columbia, Lebanon, Montour, and Schuylkill counties, and parts of Northumberland, Luzerne, and Berks counties. Those actions set the tone for the importance of tonight's Public Candidates Forum. While the Schuylkill Chamber of Commerce provides many programs and services to its business and nonprofit members, all of which improve the quality of life for you, our citizens, one of the most important elements that the Chamber offers is government advocacy on the important issues facing us all. Making sure our members and our community at large are fully aware of the important issues before us daily and the choices we have for representation are integral to the Chamber's mission. We sincerely thank all members of the media for covering tonight's candidates forum. We have asked the 6 candidates to proceed to the cafeteria located directly behind the stage or out the door to the left for a few follow-up questions should they be necessary. We respectfully ask the audience to allow the candidates these few additional moments if the media requires, and so the media can quickly complete their coverage work for this evening. Please get out and vote for the May 15th, 2018 primaries. Travel home safely. Thank you for your interest, and thank you for attending, and good night.